it's just the nature of man, the fallen nature of man, that we tend to, um, I don't know, get together in these larger groups, and we begin to speak among ourselves, and we think that because we have a lot of people agreeing with us, that somehow God, that's what God is saying. And that's one of the reasons why I label this rant and or devotion for Father's Devotions as the community of deception. Just because you have a lot of people thinking something, even within the church, doesn't make it true. And I think that we have a tendency of deceiving ourselves when we get into a community of like-minded people. I think community, and human nature obviously being what it is, there is a false sense of rightness that we may have, a false sense of truth that we may have, a false sense even of, I don't know, euphoric well-being that manifests itself within the community of like-minded people. So just be aware of that. This is for obviously you, Audrey and Katie, and anybody else who's listening, right? This is a Father's Devotions. But just be aware of that phenomena, even among believers. And I think in what's coming to this country, and I'm speaking about the United States of America, I wouldn't put all of your potatoes necessarily in the bags of your churches. I would put them in the authority of Christ and his word first and foremost, because I don't think that the churches, the Methodobaptist, Costal, Lutheranic mix, along with certain elements of the Roman Catholic Church, are going to be on the ball in warning you, really, in the ultimate sense, about what's coming, and maybe even in preparing you for what's coming. Because I think a lot of them are going to be caught up in, triumphalism and positivism and, determinism, we can do it and all of that. And I think that many people have equated those things, and I've said this before, with the gospel, when it really isn't, right? The gospel is based on the core truth, the core reality of justification by faith, and not all these other things. But because you have enough so-called believers believing otherwise, it sort of is almost canonized, or I don't know, it almost becomes divine. And again, it's this false sense of euphoria and well-being and truth that the community provides, and which is not necessarily a good thing. I mean, I am reminded about Israel right before they were taken into captivity, and I'm talking about the northern kingdom of Israel, because you recall that the kingdom split under Solomon's son, right? So you had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, right? The northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah. But I'm reminded of the fact that right up to when both of these kingdoms were no more, when they were taken captive, the people weren't really aware in a general sense, and nor were the so-called religious figures aware enough to warn the people about what was happening. There were fringe people in both cases who were, but the community of so-called believers really weren't. And I think that's because they were caught up in the false sense of security and euphoria and truth that community often brings. I mean, there's almost an anesthetizing characteristic of community. We get so caught up within one another, the gaggle of one another, that we don't see outside all of that to what's coming. And human nature, as I always say, and I know I'm repeating myself, being what it is, we will have a tendency to do that even today, some 2,500 to 3,000 years later. Human nature remains the same. So just be aware, even as believers, of the deceptive tendency of community. It's not always a good thing, so just be aware of that, and don't expect, as I said, for your churches to necessarily warn you about what's coming. As I said earlier, place the authority, and I know this is hard because it goes against our fallen nature in a sense, right? Our natures have been perverted by the fall. But we need to break with that tendency and give ourselves over, I think, ultimately to the authority of Christ and his word. And I'm not slamming Roman Catholics necessarily on this either. This is for Protestants as well. As the community of believers, how do I say this? There is a sense, I think, of independent mindedness that is a good thing. The more we are a part of the community of all true believers, I hope I'm making sense here, there develops within us more of an independent way of thinking, an independent way of thinking that places us outside of the herd mentality and that false sense of community, the false sense of well-being that is often manifest within the community, but is not necessarily a good thing. The community of believers, absolutely, but independent thinking born of that true community, absolutely as well. Well, that's all I have to say. I know this may be somewhat of a confusing message to both of you ladies and to the other 1 1/10 people that are actually listening to these, all right? But just place your authority in Christ and his word. That's where you're going to have to be. God bless you both.